Inflation puts a pinch on household budgets across Taiwan, but the end could be in sight. With Election Day fast approaching, candidates in Taichung are getting into a war of words. Fury on the streets in Guangzhou. Anger boils over in China over COVID restrictions. Plus, Taiwan's government is banning people from keeping native macaques as pets. Meet one of the few people who are legally allowed to handle Taiwan's only native primate species. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Household budgets across Taiwan are feeling the pinch. With inflation climbing, the costs of everything from food to transport to housing are continuing to go up. But as John Van Trieste reports, there are signs this upward trend could soon be stabilizing.
They're rich, juicy, and steamed to perfection, and they're about to get a bit pricier. Xiaolongbao, or soup dumplings, form the backbone of the menu at restaurant Din Tai Fung, an ambassador of Taiwanese cuisine to the world. But inflation in Taiwan is on the rise, and it's products such as these that are slated for a price hike. The Government Statistics Office says food prices went up by almost 6% between January and October. Spiraling costs for basic ingredients are leaving their mark across the food service industry.
面粉的话，相对去年来说，它有涨到40%；鸡蛋的话，大约40%。老板是希望说可以回馈给消费者，目前的话都自行吸收。
Other sectors are also likely to see prices go up. Taipei area taxi drivers are demanding meters start at 90 NT dollars, up from the current 70. That's an increase of around 64 US cents. The demand comes amid a pandemic-driven wage crunch, which has caused cab drivers' average monthly income to fall below minimum wage. Housing prices in Taiwan cities are soaring too, even in places like Hsinchu, once seen as a more affordable urban area.
新竹县是在这几年可以说是就是全台房价涨最快的区域之一，当然就是这个科技业的带动的效果，很多这个区域的价格呢，它新案开价甚至是7、8字头，已经超越了新北市很多这个主要的蛋黄区。高雄市的发展呢，跟这个新竹一带有点像，大型企业要去设厂，带动了整体的这个话题及购买量。先前供料上涨的关系，所以这个新案的价格逐渐的攀高。
Gordon Sun from the Taiwan Institute of Economic Research says drivers of inflation include the war in Ukraine and Chinese production lines shutting down due to mass COVID-19 lockdowns. But he says inflation in Taiwan is far milder than in the West, Japan, or China, especially when it comes to oil prices.
Our government do some good job, such as we reduce the import energy tax. So even the global oil price goes up when our government reduce the import tax, so the inflation rate can maintain stable.
Sun says food prices have been harder to control, but he believes Taiwan's government will not need to change its current policies to adjust to the rising costs. Sun sees inflation slowing as oil rates fall and China eases lockdown rules. Weaker economies around the globe also mean that prices can't continue to increase indefinitely.
Maybe to 2023, the first half, the global inflation rate will go down more. You can see the U.S. and China, their inflation rate is go down. When global CPI inflation rate go down, Taiwan situation will be better for 2023.
If this prediction is correct, it could mean that some sweet relief for Taiwan's consumers is just around the corner. Klein Wang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A Taiwanese company has been included in a new wave of sanctions by the United States for supposedly helping supply the Russian military. The Treasury Department has frozen the assets of Sharp Edge Engineering, which it says served as a front company to purchase microelectronic components from Asia. The Treasury says this was on behalf of a Russian firm with ties to the military. The US has imposed sweeping sanctions on Russia since the country invaded Ukraine in February. Taiwan's economics ministry says it is already aware of Sharp Edge and is also closely monitoring another company set up by the same founder. Foreign trade officials have been told to increase oversight of exports that could be used for military purposes. 2 people have been killed in Poland after a missile struck near the Ukrainian border on Wednesday. Polish authorities have described the missile as Russian-made. The country's government has launched an investigation into the incident, but is not treating it as an intentional attack. The blast comes amid large-scale Russian missile strikes on Ukraine, targeting power infrastructure across the country. World leaders held an emergency meeting at the G20 summit in Bali following the events in Poland. US President Joe Biden said it is unlikely that Russia was the source of the strike. Moscow has denied any involvement. Poland is a NATO member. The alliance has called an emergency meeting over the incident. And we'll keep following all the latest developments from Poland in the coming days. Back in Taiwan, local elections are just around the corner. Campaigning is heating up, and so is the war of words between candidates, especially in the central city of Taichung. Eric Gao explains.
Facing off on TV. Taichung's mayoral candidates held a televised policy presentation on Wednesday, with hopefuls trading barbs over their platforms. One major issue was air pollution in the central Taiwanese city. Ruling Democratic Progressive Party candidate Tsai Chi-chang took aim at incumbent Liu Xiuyin's performance on that front.
市长最近这几天也不再叫市民抬头看看台中的天空，因为台中的天空空气的确是不好。4年过去了，卢市长并没有让这样的一个政见能够得到落实。
Liu, who belongs to the opposition Kuomintang, hit back. She said efforts to cut emissions from the city's power plant, a major source of pollution, are starting to bear fruit.
经济部他们决定要增设2部燃气机组的时候，我们可以接受。我们希望增加燃气机组之后，燃煤一定要退场，要拆除。
Another point of contention, the city's public safety record.
为什么我们台中老是会给外县市的民众嘲笑，说我们是庆忌之都，我们都没有办法让这个城市的治安乐观起来。
Liu struck back again, calling Tsai out for insulting the city he wants to lead.
刚才蔡副院长把台中市批评得一无是处，譬如说，他以庆忌之都来形容台中市，应该为了选举而抹黑自己的城市，制造恐慌吗？
With less than 2 weeks to go before voting day, candidates are getting more pointed in their rhetoric. But it's voters who will have the final word on November 26th. Patrick Chen and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
Across the strait in China, violent protests have erupted in the city of Guangzhou, signaling growing public anger over strict COVID-19 restrictions. Ed Moon reports.
In a video posted on social media, residents of Guangzhou in China smashed down barriers designed to keep them under a COVID lockdown. The rare violence, a sign that frustrations with China's strict COVID-0 approach are boiling over. On Chinese social media, several hashtags related to the riots were scrubbed clean, and local authorities have not yet commented. The unrest in the massive manufacturing hub, a city of 19 million people, comes after workers in another part of the country walked out of the world's largest iPhone factory, owned by Taiwanese tech company Foxconn. The workers feared a snap lockdown after a COVID outbreak and were concerned over deteriorating conditions at the complex. Last week, the Chinese government shortened quarantine for inbound travelers and close contacts of COVID patients, the first significant relaxation of some of the strictest COVID rules in the world. For nearly 3 years, long lockdowns and constant testing have wreaked havoc on Chinese people's lives and livelihoods. But some citizens are still wary of opening up too quickly.
我感觉他会一步一步放缓，不可能一下就解除。这样解除，老百姓说实话也关了3年了，也不可能马上就进入这个状态，也不太现实。所以有好多人还有抱着很多的顾虑，没有办法，这个我们只能慢慢来，一步一步来吧。
But if the government moves too slowly, the return to normal life could be outpaced by people's growing frustration. As Naya Zhou, Rick Glowett, and Ed Moon for TaiwanPlus.
Police in northern Taiwan have made more arrests in an ongoing crackdown on extortion and kidnapping rings. 2 arrests were made in New Taipei City, where a 38-year-old held captive by the gang was rescued. A further 4 arrests were also made in neighbouring Taoyuan City. A nationwide police campaign targeting kidnap and extortion rings has netted over 1,200 arrests in the past week. A Taiwanese film, Gaga, is up for 6 honours at the Golden Horse Awards this weekend. It shows how an election splits apart an Indigenous Atayal family and how they struggle to find reconciliation. Director Laha Meibo is the first Indigenous woman to be nominated for the top directing award. TaiwanPlus caught up with her to learn more about the movie.
The movie Gaga opens by following an indigenous Taiwan man as he journeys deep into the mountains of Taiwan. The man, Hayong, represents the older generation of Taiwan people. He struggles to keep up with the changing world and chooses to continue living in a traditional way. He lives by a philosophy that the Taiwan people call Gaga.
因为那是一整个人从生到死你要遵循的东西，那个东西很内化也很外显。我所谓内化就是道德规范，我所谓外显就是你不能偷东西，你男女之间不能没有分际，你不可以侵犯别人的领域。其实就有点像，现代来说有点像宪法，可是它是很无形的。那你犯了这些东西，当然不会有那种刑罚，可是我们相信天上的主灵会惩罚你。对，所以它就是一个大自然跟人跟土地的那一种生存的那种原则。
The film shows how these beliefs and ideals have struggled to survive in the modern age. Gaga centers around an election in a Taiwan village where Hayong and his family live. When his oldest son decides to run for township chief, Hayong and his family try to help. But disputes arise, and eventually they break the family apart. Laha got the idea of using an election to tell this story 4 years ago. She saw how an actual election changed the way of life in an indigenous village.
其实外来的选举是破坏部落和谐最大的元凶之一，因为选举让一个部落本来是一个家就开始分裂，那甚至是一个家庭为了选举也分裂。然后因为以前我们是头目也是世袭，所谓头目的领导者也是世袭的，今天该怎么做就是头目说了算，不是像现在这样子你争我夺，大家互相攻击，然后就是有很多不好的文化都进来。
Laha says that preserving traditional values is not a challenge for just the Taiwan. Change, she says, can be difficult for everyone, but Laha still thinks that the shared bond of family and community can help people adapt.
所以我相信其他族群也有像Gaga一样的价值，因为家庭血缘的关系，你不可能就是仇恨到底，所以因为家，然后会让你有前进的动力，因为家也让你纠结，然后因为家，可是你也才有你嘛，对啊，所以我觉得我在讲的是这样的一个精神，对，是我觉得是全人类都通用的，
Gaga is now showing in theaters in Taiwan. It's up for Best Narrative Feature, Best Director, and 4 other awards at the Golden Horse Awards this Saturday in Taipei. Damon Lin, Yvonne Yang, and Yujing Huang for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, find out what the meeting between China's Xi Jinping and the Australian Prime Minister means for Taiwan.
我们真的很久没有表演，
走到了一个必须要停下来的状态，因为我又不会看谱，
就不知道哪来的韵，有些人喜欢。
想到我最擅长的事情好像是玩团。
其实我的歌很多都是在解决我自己遇到的问题。
我通常会发脾气或者是暴怒，是因为不公平。
发现我对舞台是不熟悉的。
诚实的讲述你自己，就会有人听。
For more stories from around the world and from right here in Changhua County, Taiwan, visit www.taiwanplus.com. Right? He says moo.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. The leaders of China and Australia signalled an end to 6 years of diplomatic hostility after meeting at the G20 summit in Indonesia on Tuesday. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says his talks with Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping were a step towards a more stable relationship. It was the first meeting between leaders of Australia and China since 2016. Albanese says he raised the issue of Chinese tariffs and bans on Australian goods. Those restrictions have been in place since 2020, when Australia called for an inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. China is Australia's biggest trade partner and buys over $100 billion of Australian exports a year. Xi also acknowledged what he called difficulties in the two countries' relationship. He says China and Australia should work together to build stronger ties. To find out more about what the meeting means for the two countries and Taiwan, our reporter Stash Butler spoke to Australian think tank director Bryce Whitefield.
What's the significance of this meeting? What does it mean for Australia and for China?
Well, it's a thaw in the relationship between Australia and China. There hasn't been a significant prime ministerial level meeting since 2016 when Xi and Turnbull met. Some people in Australia are declaring this a victory for Australian foreign policy. I think that goes a little bit too far. It should be noted that there are still outstanding issues that are not resolved. And these are not likely to be resolved, but at least at the moment we have the two sides talking to each other. We can expect the relationship to be moving on a more even keel, even though there are significant differences in the relationship.
What should we make of the fact that the meeting between Albanese and Xi was only 32 minutes long compared to the Biden-Xi meeting, which was 3 hours?
Well, look, obviously, China sees the United States as a fellow great power. Australia is simply not in that category when it comes to power relations between the two countries. Australia is not China's first priority, although sometimes it may think it is.
Regarding that kind of triangle of Australia, China, and the United States, how much do you think Australia has bought into the United States' approach to China and the Indo-Pacific and to Taiwan?
Well, to some extent, Australia has bought into the US position on China, but to some extent it's also led the Indo-Pacific approach to China. You need to remember, for example, that it was Australia out in front banning Huawei, the telecommunications company, from having a stake in Australia's 5G network. And that was a position that Australia took before other powers. So in many ways, Australia has been a leader in that regard and has been sort of setting the tone for relations with other powers in the area.
And with regard to Taiwan, obviously, President Biden has now said on multiple occasions that the United States would intervene in a conflict. Where do you think Australia stands on that?
Look, the smart money would be that Australia would take its lead from the United States on that particular issue. If there was a conflict over Taiwan and it did involve the United States, it would be very hard to imagine Australia not becoming involved in some way, shape or form, even though there are many in Australia who do not believe that a war over Taiwan is vital to Australian interests.
Do you think that Australia would support Taiwan's bid to join the CPTPP?
It would be hard for Australia not to support Taiwan's bid to join the CPTPP. I mean, Taiwan is an outstanding member of the international community that adheres to the rules-based international order, even if it is not an official nation state in Australia's eyes. So one could certainly imagine Australia supporting Taiwan in that regard.
Former US President Donald Trump has formally declared his candidacy for the 2024 presidential election. Trump made the announcement during a speech to supporters at his private Mar-a-Lago club on Tuesday. He avoided saying much about the 2020 presidential race, which he still refuses to admit he lost to current President Joe Biden. Despite a strong base, Trump faces serious political challenges, including from within his own party. Many Republicans blame him for the party's mediocre performance in the recent midterm elections. He is also the subject of several criminal investigations, including over his removal of classified documents from the White House. His announcement speech, Trump repeated the rhetoric from his earlier campaigns.
The blood-soaked streets of our once great cities are cesspools of violent crimes, which are being watched all over the world as leadership of other countries explain that this is what America and democracy is really all about. How sad.
Photojournalist Chang Chien-chi has won in 2 categories of Taiwan's prestigious Excellent Journalism Awards. Zhang's coverage of war-torn Ukraine won the Photo Series Award. He has travelled to the dangerous front lines of the war 4 times since Russia invaded in February. Zhang's work was also recognised with a Special Contribution Award based on his career as a photojournalist. He is best known for his coverage of a Taiwanese temple's unconventional methods to treat psychiatric patients. The Taiwanese photographer is one of only 2 Asian members of the world's most prestigious photographic cooperative, Magnum Photos. The Formosan rock macaque is Taiwan's only indigenous primate species. Some people illegally keep these monkeys as pets, though it can be extremely difficult for the animals to adjust to their life outside their natural habitat. Leslie Liao reports on one of only a handful of caretakers who are permitted to foster macaques.
This is Mei Mei. She's a Formosan rock macaque. Though she now has a gentle disposition, this hasn't always been the case.
Wow.
Mei Mei's past is complicated. Her original owner got married and could no longer take care of her. So Mei Mei was sent to her owner's parents' house. But she couldn't get used to the change.
之后就是有逃脱的问题，应该就是另外的地方不习惯，才会逃脱的。
父母因为养在顶楼，然后他会去翻盆栽啊或推盆栽，然后造成他们一些困扰，所以父母也不愿意再帮他代养。
Cai Jialun is Mei Mei's current handler. He's one of only 7 registered caretakers in Taiwan who can legally look after macaques. Cai is good at what he does, as shown by his interactions with Mei Mei. He can openly reach for food inside the macaque's mouth, something that could cost a less experienced handler a finger. When Cai isn't around, Mei Mei eagerly looks for him. Cai's work is necessary to properly care for macaques like Mei Mei, which were raised as pets. The animals aren't meant to be kept in captivity, and their natural habitat is in the country's wilderness. But those which have been raised by humans would have difficulties adjusting to the wild. They now need seasoned caretakers who know how to handle macaques correctly and with the utmost protection. Like in most countries, it's illegal to catch and raise wild animals in Taiwan, but that doesn't stop people from trying.
动保团体他们历年来拿到的一些他们发现民众有饲养的一个状况，那我们总共151件就去做一个全面性的清查。猴子有很多人畜共通的传染疾病，包括肺结核、那个泡状病毒。
Animal protection authorities are now cracking down on illicit macaque raising. People who keep macaques as pets will have until the end of November to surrender their animals to the proper authorities. If they fail to do so, they'll be heavily fined. Even Cai, a person who's developed close bonds with macaques, thinks the ban is a good idea.
禁养令的话啦，我是赞同，因为像我们来说的话，我不一定要养猴子。我本身也是有养一些鸽子啊，或者是那个狗啊，这些都是可以。它让你人工饲养啦，繁殖了几百年之后，它们也是一样有野性。
Cai cares deeply for Mei Mei. But it's clear that he wants what's best for both her and her entire species. This means not raising the macaques in captivity, but allowing them to live freely in their natural environment. Andy Xue and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwanese martial artist Luo Jialing has bagged her first silver medal at the World Taekwondo Championships in Mexico. Luo lost in the women's 57-kilogram final to China's Luo Zongshi. The Chinese athlete was on the front foot from the fight start. She won the first round 2-1 and broke a tie in the second under the event's new best-of-3 format. Despite losing the match, this was Luo's best international performance so far. After taking home the bronze at the Tokyo Olympics last year, she placed 11th in the world in her weight class. Her silver in Mexico is sure to move her up in the ranking. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we leave you with images of the launch of NASA's Artemis 1 rocket. It is a big step closer to putting astronauts back on the moon for the first time since the Apollo program 50 years ago. I'm Yin Khvat. Take care. See you next time.